Okay, so we're going to dive into this really powerful theory that completely reimagines what truly drives human society, all the way from ancient empires to the AI powered future we're walking into right now. We always say money makes the world go round, right? Well, the theory we're digging into today says not so fast. It argues that history isn't just a simple story about money, but a much more interesting clash of different kinds of power. So, what are these hidden forces? Well, here they are, the five capitals. The whole idea is that you can understand pretty much all of human history through how these five things production, human, monetary, credit, and personality capital interact. And as we're going to see, each one has had its moment in the sun. It's time to define an entire era. All right, let's start at the beginning. Our first stop on this journey is the ancient world, a time when really your destiny was decided by the dirt under your feet and the blood in your veins. Let's see how these first two types of capital built a world of kings and serfs. So back then, in these early agricultural societies, this was literally everything. Land, livestock, the tools you needed to farm, this was the fundamental source of all wealth. If you controlled the production material capital, you basically controlled the whole kingdom. Simple as that. But it wasn't just about what you owned. There was this other kind of capital that was just as powerful, if not more so, natural personality capital. And this is fascinating, because here, your value had nothing to do with what you did. It was all about who you were born as. If you were born a noble, you had an inherent power that a peasant could never, ever hope to achieve. And this is a really key point the analysis makes, and you can see it laid out right here. On one side, you've got this value that comes from being born into an exclusive club, which, creates a super rigid hierarchy. But on the other side, you have this idea of value coming from inclusive citizenship, something that grants rights to everyone. This clash is going to be a huge theme as we move forward. Okay, fast forward a bit. A whole new era kicks off, and with it, two new forms of capital show up and just completely flip the old system of land and blood on its head. This wasn't just a tech upgrade, it was a revolution in what society decided was valuable. Suddenly, as the world industrialized, just having a noble title or a big chunk of land, well, it wasn't gonna cut it anymore. The Industrial Revolution put two new things on top: money to build the factories and the human skill needed to actually run them. This created a brand new social ladder based on owners and workers. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just about economics. It was a complete rewrite of the social rulebook. The main conflict in society was no longer between nobles and peasants. It was now between the people who owned the money and the people who only had their own labor to sell. All right, so let's bring this whole framework into our world right now. The fifth and final capital is what really helps explain the crazy geopolitical landscape we're living in. And it's not built on gold or factories. It's built on something way more abstract: trust. Now, when we say credit capital, don't just think about getting a loan from the bank. It's so much bigger than that. The theory defines it as this deep, profound trust in the system's stability and its laws. It's the belief that contracts will be honored, that rules will be followed. It's the very bedrock that lets our modern global economy actually work. And this slide? It's a fantastic illustration of the whole US-China dynamic, viewed through this very lens. The analysis suggests that while China's power is built on its sheer economic scale, all that production and money, the US, on the other hand, gets its global juice from credit, capital, which is rooted in a legal system that, for better or worse, inspires global trust. But here's the thing, those old forms of capital, they don't just vanish. A perfect modern example is China's hukou, or household registration system. You can think of it as a modern form of natural personality capital. It legally creates two classes, urban and rural, with totally different access to resources, which creates this massive income gap based on nothing more than where you happened to be born. And that brings us to the end game, the final and maybe the most critical part of this whole analysis, our future. Because AI is here, and it's about to kick off the next great capital shift, one that could totally upend the economic order of the last 200 years. And look, this is not some small ripple in the pond. The source material we're pulling from is projecting that AI could displace up to 15% of the workforce. Think about that. The one thing most of us have to offer, our skills, our knowledge, our human capital. What happens when that's not worth much anymore? So yeah, this is a huge crisis. I mean, for centuries, the whole deal has been you work, you get paid, you live. But what happens if that work just goes away? How do we decide who gets what? What is our value even based on then? According to this framework, this is not some far-off sci-fi movie plot. This is the economic challenge of our lifetime. The very foundation of our social contract, work for a living, it's starting to show some serious cracks.
So, what's the answer? Well, the theory actually circles back to that other type of identity capital we talked about earlier, communal personality capital. And the solution it proposes is, well, it's pretty radical. It's a future where your right to a piece of the pie doesn't come from what you do, but simply because you exist. Your citizenship itself becomes your most valuable asset.
And, we can actually see little hints of this kind of future already. Take the Nordic countries, for example. They use these really strong welfare systems, which is basically a form of communal capital, to create societies with incredibly low income inequality. As you can see, their Gini index is way down at 0.25, which is a stark contrast to many other places.
And so this all leaves us with one heck of a final thought. The theory is really suggesting a future where our value isn't tied to our productivity, but just to our humanity. As AI basically forces our hand, the real question becomes, what kind of future do we actually want to build? Because make no mistake, the next great capital shift, it's already started.